we're big fans of barefoot coaching. You're a journalist, and you help people with everything career change to finding out what they really want to do with their lives. So thank you for joining us
Thank
today,
you for having
Joel.
me
It's
on.
really, really lovely to see you.
Lovely
I
to be
know
on.
we're going to be chatting today about how to make decisions, among other things. I think many of us, Joel, are, we're in the midst of this big pause. But unfortunately, our lives don't pause. I mean, there's big decisions. I've got a member of my team buying a house at the moment. I've got some of my friends wanting to divorce their husbands at the moment. Anybody else? I've got other people wanting not to go back to their work because they're finding it's like, oh, they're loving being at home, and they don't want to go back. But so as a coach, I know that you work a lot with helping people make decisions. What
Mm.
what how should we be making big decisions in this lockdown? That's, I suppose, what I want to ask.
Well, I think sometimes we have to. I coach a lot of parents of children with special needs, and my son has autism as well. And it's often a case of decisions like, well, should my child carry on going to school? They might be entitled to, but is it safe for the teachers, for example? So these are all kind of decisions that do have to be made quite quickly. My wife had a big decision to make about whether to continue to go on an unpaid sabbatical, which is a great thing and means loads more time spent with our children and things. But, in the current climate where many of us are thinking, will I still have an income after a few months? So sometimes I think we do have to. But of course, if there are decisions that can be deferred, I think that it's a case of we should try and defer what we can. Absolutely.
Sure. But how do we make decisions in this time of lockdown? What's a really good process to kind of help us kind of get through this? So if we have got a big decision to make, rather than reacting, how can we respond in a calm way?
Absolutely. Well, let me tell you some things that I've found really useful. A kind of a series of steps, really. And I think the first one is just to sort of understand what's happening in our brains at that moment, and understand that really it's not just us. It's not just you. It's a universal thing, and it's about how the part of the brain, the limbic system, that's very, very old and has come through evolution. We've developed this kind of fight or flight response, and it's a response back millions of years ago to if a threat had sort of jumped out at us or something. But in the modern world, it can be a hindrance, because we can either freeze up and feel unwilling to make a decision, or kind of perhaps rush into something not appropriate. I had that a while back when I had a big financial decision to make. And I was I was feeling a bit stressed and thinking, I've got so much on, I kind of need to get this off my plate. And I felt rushed into a kind of hasty decision, which I then later regretted, and my wife was furious, etc. So it can be, so what I've learned is that the first step is to try and calm down that part of the brain by just noticing it, and also understanding that it's okay. We all feel this kind of these thoughts and this sense of kind of panic at decision making, and that sort of self-acceptance is, I think, the first step. And then that frees us up to look at what things can we control, because we tend to think, oh, I have to control everything. And again, that's something I think from evolution. In days gone by, we would have been completely at the mercy of events if we weren't able to exert some control. But beware of that tendency in the brain to want to have complete control, and just accept, it's okay. All through life, we have to make really difficult decisions with only minimal information, from who we're going to marry, to what things we'll study at university, and just so many big decisions we have to make, and it's so difficult. And it's that acceptance that it is okay, we can do it, and there are other people going through the same thing, is I think a really useful step. And the third step would be, well, what can we control in this situation? And there may well be much more than we think. We may think, well, my income's not secure, but for example, your partner may have an income that is secure, so you can perhaps choose to focus on that, or just focus on the things that you do actually know. And then, you know, once you start to do that, that really helps to calm down that part of the brain and bring it onto the sort of frontal area where you can really make those decisions. So it's just, yeah, it's really that acceptance, and then make a conscious choice. Let's focus on the positive things, which I know is much more easily said than done. But a good way I've found is to simply write down a list. You know, what right now, what are the things that are going right? What are the things I could be proud of or grateful for? And write those down. And I've found that's actually a very useful way to do it. Another really useful tip is to simply just sit and notice. So, you know, concentrate on your breathing and notice your body. How does my body feel right now? Is there tightness in my chest, in my muscles? What are my emotions? What am I feeling here? What is there? You know, is it a feeling of why is this happening to me, or I can't do this, or something like that? And then once you note those down, perhaps even write them down can be really helpful. Hello, sorry, you cut out for a second there, Susie.
That's, yeah, I was lost. So fantastic that you managed to keep going. That was absolutely brilliant. So what did I miss?
So I was just explaining one technique I've found useful, which is to basically just sort of sit quietly for a little while and just make the decision to notice, you know, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? As in, what emotions am I feeling? Could be a sense of like, why is this happening to me? You know, I can't do this. And or notice, is it a feeling of frustration? Notice how your body feels and perhaps write that down, make a note of it. Is it like tightness in my chest? Is it tingling in my legs, or whatever it might be? And the act of actually writing them down or making an effort to focus on them, I found really helps, because it almost gives my sort of racing mind something to do, you know, and it provides a little bit of focus. And then after that, you can then start to focus more on, well, if I'm viewing it in this way, is there another way to view this? You know, am I missing something? Is there a way that's more compassionate to myself that I could be viewing this situation in? Am I assuming something here that isn't the case? And often it's what we're assuming is that everything is hopeless, when in fact there are more things in this situation we can control than we might think.
Sure. Can we just talk a little bit about when you get hijacked by that? You know, so there's I totally get what you're saying about, you know, being able to step back and being able to kind of look at the positives, being grateful, all of those things. But sometimes, you know, I've been in self-development for a long time now, probably 30 years, and yesterday I got really hijacked by a thought. And I found myself completely gripped by it, and I was in my flight thing, and I was going to run away from the situation, and I had all of these really in it. And it took me ages to go, oh, hang on, Susie, this is your old pattern. Okay, step back. But it took me a long time to do that, even knowing all the information that I know about self-development. So what are some good techniques? Is how do you go from being in the story to watching the story? How do we do that?
Well, yeah, it is very, very difficult, but I think the only real way is about noticing. It's almost about saying to myself, I'm gonna follow these steps. I'm gonna choose to notice what the pattern is here, and to understand that the pattern isn't me. You know, so if it's a case of that example I gave earlier, I was feeling really rushed and harassed and feeling I've got to get this done. And I know myself, I have a pattern where I have a kind of a drive urge, which is like, get it done quickly. And it's just being aware of that. And when I see the signs coming up, I then think, right, I'm going to choose to stop, and I'm going to notice what is happening, and notice, you know, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And that for me is the way I've found is is useful to kind of interrupt that process. And it is extraordinarily difficult once it's started. And another thing I think that happens is that if we do something that we're not pleased about or proud of, we then think, oh no, it's all completely messed up and it's pointless now and there's no point. And also realizing that, you know, we're not going to get it right. And so if we are triggered into a situation and we make a bad decision, for example, you know, most things can be undone. You know, there are always ways we can stop right now and put the situation right. And I think it's focusing on that. I think perhaps one good suggestion would be sort of, you know, tell yourself it's not too late. I can still make this situation better, no matter how bad it seems to have got.
I mean, I think it's called practice for a reason, isn't it? A self-development practice or a meditation practice or a self-awareness practice. Because I think the more you practice, the better. And also, you know, as I say, 30 years I've been doing self-development and still I got really triggered yesterday. And then comes the self-kindness. I think you've mentioned self-kindness, about how to be compassionate to yourself when you find yourself, oh, here we go again. I didn't see that. I got triggered by it. I was in that story for at least an hour before I was like, oh, okay, this is not helpful. How can we be kinder to ourselves?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand that the things we're feeling are usually pretty universal. So, you know, if we are triggered by something, you know, that understanding that, think about what you're feeling, and then think about all the other people who must be feeling that right now and who will have felt that all through history, basically, to understand that we're part of a common humanity. And for me, that really works. And in terms of self-kindness, I actually find that simply thinking of myself in my role as a father, but imagining that I am the child, is really useful. So if you are a parent, or you do have a very caring relationship with somebody, and we all have, I think it's a very common thing to be able to bestow a lot of love on people close to us, but we often don't really use the same towards ourselves. So I think really to try and talk to yourself in that soothing way, for me, as if it was my son or my daughter, and just to say, you know, it's okay, this is tough, and I understand that, is a great first step.
I mean, I completely agree. I think you know, the kind of parenting our inner child, we've had a few therapists on, and it's a common theme around how, and it's a way of self-soothing, in a way of understanding there's a part of us that feels vulnerable and scared, and being, rather than sort of dismissing the child, it's kind of just saying, okay, I hear you, come on, honey, it's going to be all right. And then you know, but you're the one in control. Joel, this is great. Just we have to close, but there's one question from our audience here coming through to say, thanks for the great advice, great video, but I have a question. How can I overcome procrastination during the time of coronavirus? Carmel, I would say you're not alone. Definitely not alone. I think many of us have got this kind of corona brain, where we're just very scattered, and I can't concentrate. I find it quite difficult. But what advice have you got for us, Joel, about procrastination?
Well, I think it depends why you're procrastinating. I think for a lot of people, the procrastination can be actually the fear of doing the thing that you're putting off. So I think the first bit of advice would be to try and look at what it is you might be afraid of in that situation, and to sort of shine a light on it, and often you'll realize it's not quite as bad as you've been thinking. So it's just to sort of notice, and once you actually acknowledge to yourself whatever it is, like, you know, I've been putting off writing that essay, and you think, well, why am I putting what is bothering me about that essay? And then once you kind of perhaps even write it down or put it out there, and you can see it perhaps isn't quite as bad as what you feared. So that would be my first step, I think.
Yeah, great. That's great advice. I mean, you know, I think many of us who have a procrastination habit of procrastinating more. So I think also the kindness tip, the self-kindness tip,
Yeah,
is useful too. It's really good.
absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much for your time today. That was
My
absolutely
pleasure.
brilliant. I'm loving this idea of the kind of the process to decision making while we're in this time. I think that's really, really useful. But thank you so much for your time today. I hope stay safe, stay well, and with you and your family up there. But thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Susie. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.